I'm Rena Striegel. Welcome to Ag Inspo, the podcast that focuses on innovation and creativity in agriculture. In my travels across the U.S., my mind is blown by the farmers, ranchers, and business owners who are contributing to the richness of the agricultural landscape. My hope is that by sharing their stories, you will be inspired to have the courage to break through and bring an idea you have to life. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another exciting episode of Ag Inspo. Today, I am very proud and privileged to be talking to Shane New, who is a partner with Understanding Ag. And for those of you who may not be familiar with Understanding Ag, I hope you'll definitely check out their website. It is an organization that is focused on educating producers about the power of regenerative ag practices. So without further ado, let's bring on Shane. Hey, Shane, it's great to talk to you this morning. I have been looking forward to this conversation ever since we talked a couple of weeks ago. So before we get into the conversation, why don't you take a couple of minutes to just introduce yourself to our listeners?
Well, thank you, Rena. Good morning. Yeah, I'm Shane New. I'm a farmer stockman located in Holton, Kansas. We're in the very northeastern part of the state. I am one of the partners in Understanding Ag. And basically, Understanding Ag is an educational organization. We work with farmers and ranchers, helping them implement regenerative agricultural practices. And basically, it's focused on building back soil health, helping water quality, carbon sequestration, building more nutrient-dense proteins. A really big thing is trying to build, economic resilience back into farmers' bottom lines. So that's kind of what we do. I kind of get to go travel around the country. We do a host of meetings around the country. We do a lot of consulting with producers throughout North America and, in fact, worldwide, helping them implement regenerative agricultural practices. And, it's kind of an interesting deal. I mean, my passion is production agriculture, like yourself, and I'm sure many others. I grew up on a farm, basically grew up on the fender of a tractor, until you was old enough to start running the equipment. Then, you started running it. So you kind of fell in love with this industry and this business. And, and the more life has went on, I've started understanding the importance of producers and how we can affect the ecology and also make ourselves extremely profitable by doing this.
Yeah, that's really awesome. How long have you been working with Understanding Ag? And in fact, maybe even just talk about how long Understanding Ag has been in existence.
Well, Understanding Ag really kind of came from what was called the Soil Health Academy. And really the pioneers in regenerative agricultural practices. It was originally formed by David Brandt in Ohio, Gabe Brown from Bismarck, North Dakota, Ray Archuleta, and then also Dr. Alan Williams. They were kind of the founders of Soil Health Academy, and they started, working with producers, doing these academies. I would say it's probably been over 3.5 years ago. And probably about 3 years ago, they formed Understanding Ag. And at that time, they asked me if I'd like to be a consultant, to help, go out on boots on the ground on farmers' operations or ranchers and work with them, help guide them. And then, I'm not sure exactly when, it's been a couple of years ago, but then I was asked to become a partner. So, it's kind of one of those deals I tell people, sometimes dreams do come true. And I guess, I couldn't be more humbled of being thought of the knowledge level or the experience that my partners are. I mean, these guys, I get to work with the best of the best. And we also, as an organization, have the best of the best of consultants. They're out here, out in the landscape, guiding, producers how to do the implementation of the principles. What we're observing, how do we see the ecosystem processes functioning and the importance of it. And I think that's something, maybe in production agriculture, we have really kind of lost is that observation skills and what it's telling us. and how we have such a critical, important part of remedying a lot of these issues that we face today, societal wise.
Mm-hmm. As you yourself have implemented, regenerative agriculture in your own operation, what has made you the most excited as you talk to other producers who are, exploring whether or not they want to engage in changing the way they're currently farming? What have been some of the biggest wins, and what have been some of the biggest resistance that you've met from other producers?
Well, first thing is everyone within our organization, consultants and partners, are farmers and ranchers. So we have done this. We have lived this for many years, and in fact, decades for a couple of people. The first thing is, when I started doing this, I was only looking at it as just economics only. How do I reduce nutrients? I kind of got it, the immobilization, mineralization processes, decomposition, cycling those nutrients back. But, and really early on, I've been doing this for quite a few years, it was more probably focused on erosion control. But, things kind of start progressing as I kept self-educating myself and observing other operations that were ahead of the game on some of this. I started seeing their systems were completely different. And what I mean by different is you could see these energy flows. When I'd walk out into some of these individuals' pastures or farm ground, it felt like a sponge. You could physically feel that as you walked. It was just like, as I described, a sponge. Mm-hmm. And then, you've seen just this smorgasbord of diversity of insect species. And, the disposition of the livestock was very, very calm. And, the abundance and the diversity of forages you've seen. And those are things, I wasn't, seeing per se on my operation at that time, but it's things I knew I could do. And all I had to do was a little bit of changement in management. And, so my progression, probably some of the most exciting things I'm seeing, as we're starting to see this diversity of insect species, wildlife. We know we can go out here and test. I can see how much more water I'm infiltrating because I can go do an infiltration ring on my farm and go walk across the road and do that same infiltration ring on my neighbors and see how much more water, how much more of an effective rainfall event that I'm capturing. And let's face it, water's pretty important, not only for the microbiology in the soil, we need it to grow plants. That's what we're in the business to do. Mm-hmm. So holding that water, really got me thinking. I thought, my gosh, if I can increase the water filtration by, 20,000 more gallons or 40,000 more gallons on my farm, look how much more longer I can extend a growing season. So, you start focusing and seeing some of this and implementation, and you start watching it slowly turn. We do a lot of grass finished product, beef, and, we started noticing things in our pasture land. As we started implementing adaptive grazing techniques, moving cattle daily, and, some of the challenges that started it off, and now we've made things pretty simplistic where it's really relatively easy to do management every day. We started noticing this diversity of different plants. In our part of the world, there was a lot of introduction of brome, smooth brome grass, fescue, and they're not bad forages, but they're probably not really what all I want. I want more diversity, but we started noticing a lot of our warm season grasses coming back, like eastern gamma grass, big blue stem, little blue stem, Indian grass, Sidose gamma. In the last couple of years, we started noticing wildflowers coming back, black-eyed Susans, butterfly milkweed, purple prairie clover, but I didn't spend any money to do this. Mm-hmm. It's coming from management. What we're discovering is as we start building armor, utilizing the principles of soil health, build armor on the soil. Think of the armor as skin, just like skin for our bodies. So we build that armor. So now when we do receive rain, we slow that momentum of the water down a little bit. We start infiltrating that water, but we got to understand that water's not only important for the plant, it's important for the microbiology. And what I'm referring more to is the bacteria and fungi. The bacteria and fungi are what help build, especially the fungal component, build soil aggregates. So I always tell producers, think of our soil should function like a jar full of marbles. So when you dump water down inside of a jar full of marbles, it encompasses all the marbles, but it runs all the way to the bottom. It's not running off the top, but it infiltrates down. And that's what we're trying to do, is help the microbiology build soil aggregates. So we infiltrate that water, but through that infiltration process and aggregation, that latent seed bank, those seeds, like that eastern gamma grass we're seeing, the butterfly milkweed we're seeing, that seed bank's down there in our soil. And now through the aggregation, the germination is allowed to occur, and those plants are now emerging. So that's adding more diversity in my system.
Right.
And this just goes down, as we continually keep learning and the importance of that. And as I stated, we're in the grass finishing business. So now our animals have a lot more complexity, diversity of plants to forage on. And how does that relate to, their health? And not only how does it relate to their health, but how does it relate to human health? How does it relate to my consumers? This is a beautiful thing, and we're just starting to touch the tip of the iceberg with this. And it's pretty fascinating, to be quite honest with you.
What has been some of the resistance? Because, I can listen to you talk and it just sounds like this is a no-brainer, right? Like that this would just be a no-brainer to start thinking about regenerative practices, to start implementing them. What have you found to be some of the resistance that you have found as you've gone out and tried to educate other producers about what you're experiencing?
Oh, I think a lot of guys are just hesitant. I wish I could put my finger on it, because I wish guys would really understand the importance. All the resistance, I think, it's like anything, change. Mm-hmm. How do most people change? Usually a crisis occurs. And myself, for example, was, a little bit of history. I mean, like I said, my passion is production ag. When I got out of college, I wanted to farm. That's all I wanted to do. Well, honestly, I financially couldn't do it. I mean, I tried to, I went out and bought a bunch of cows and was going to calve them out, put some weight on them and try to make that work. Well, by the time I sold the cows and the calves, there was hardly any money left. And, I was young and ambitious, and, I thought, well, I can get a job in town. I need some cash flow. I need to buy some land. And, long story short, through the whole process, I ended up becoming a commercial contractor, highway contractor, and had a sod farm. And, basically I robbed all the money out of that to build my farm and a farming operation. And but I finally got sick and tired of being sick and tired. What I mean by that is we had a significant size business, it was doing really well, but it wasn't what I loved to do. And I finally just kind of bulled up. And where it probably really hit me hard was in 2013, 2014, when cattle prices were at their best. And we had a lot of cattle. I had about, 200, 300 head of mama cows. Mm-hmm. We were selling a lot of calves. And I remember we sold a bunch of calves that one winter. And when I sat down and looked at all the numbers, I looked at all my overhead, all my cost of operations, and it was a big check. And when I paid all the bills and all the equipment payments, all I netted was 40 calves of profit.
Wow.
And I thought, this doesn't make any sense. I mean, I wouldn't run my sod farm. I wouldn't run my construction business this way. Why am I doing this to my farm? And so I really started questioning a lot of stuff. And I was already doing a lot of the principles and, what I call regenerative agricultural practices at that time. But I also kind of referred to it, I was just kind of being intentional-ish. I really wasn't being intentional. And I just finally said, enough's enough. And it's one of those deals I thought, I'm never going to get this to occur. I'm never going to get this to happen until so basically I decided the contracting days were over with. I'm going to put all my energy into this. I'm going to get this figured out. So basically I took all my safety nets out. I don't participate in any government programs, so I didn't have to worry about that. But it's kind of one of those sink or swim situations. And I put myself in that position, but I wanted the challenge because it made me become intentional because I knew the importance of it. I've seen way too many guys who had already been implementing this and doing this and what they were getting achieved. And I thought, by golly, I can do this myself. And it's one of those deals. People got to overcome their fears. And, I love listening to motivational speakers. And in fact, I really enjoy listening to former Navy SEALs. I just blows my mind. Those guys can endure that kind of training.
Yeah.
And and still be sane, quote unquote. But one of my point is, one of the commonalities when you listen to them talk is they've had to learn to teach themselves to make uncomfortable comfortable. And I think that's a unique skill. And most people don't want to do that. And that's kind of what I had to, force myself. I'm not trying to compare myself to that level of uncomfortable, but that's what you had to do. It was a couple of years there. It was kind of ugly. And what I mean by ugly is I was really questioning my thought process, what I was doing, but it made I had to dig in harder, and I had to keep reading, and I had to keep, talking. I had to keep doing testing. I mean, that's another thing. I don't think most producers really want to stop and take the time to test. And I kind of looked at, I'm running a business, so it's no different than when I was running the sod business. I had to test things. I had to test new varieties. I had to test different tensile strengths on sod fabric. And, there's always things I was always testing on the sod farm. And if it worked, I just ramped it up. But if it didn't work, I didn't do it.
Right.
So, some of that mindset I pulled over into our production ag model.
So what have you found as because it's pretty obvious that you enjoy data and you enjoy, a little bit of experimentation, seeing which will outperform something else. What have you found like in your own operation about just like your cost of production and, some other like real benefits that you've seen from this transition process?
Well, one thing is, we're running cattle. So I look at everything on a per unit basis, so a per unit could be a cow, and a per unit could be her calf. So right now, compared to what most operations in our area are doing, we're probably 20 cents just on the grazing aspect. We have reduced tremendously our cost of feed production. We're grazing much longer in the season. There's still a cost we put associated with that forage that we're growing. We've increased our biomass tremendously from water fields. So, from when we started, when I really started actually measuring the biomass we had to what we're doing now it's going to be a little bit of seasonal fluctuation. We're probably closer to 2,000 to 3,000 more pounds of biomass. Now, this is all being generated without any input cost. So, nutrient reduction, I think this year here, I'm probably going to spend, but probably total tons wise, because we still have some monoculture hay ground, brome. We're probably only doing about 10 tons of fertilizer. We used to buy close to 30, 35 tons of fertilizer on an annual basis. So we've significantly reduced that cost. We no longer worm our cattle, so we do not have that expense. We don't use any implants anymore with our cattle. In fact, we've got enough diversity of most of our pastures that we've taken away the mineral program. All they get is loose salt, so we reduce that cost. We changed the time of year we're calving. I don't think guys think about this. So, we used to calve like a lot of others in January and February, and we always had face it, you always had a death loss. You lose a calf in the cold weather, whatever the case may be. We significantly, that's, calving in, we just started calving a week ago. The warmer temperatures, we don't have the chilled calves, we don't have the short ears. We're not setting our colostrum, tubing calves any longer. So you got rid of all that cost. We're more in sync with when nature works. And guys, guys are always say, well, you said, what happens if a cow have problems? Well, she's only going to have a problem once. That's kind of sounds cold-hearted, but really when we went to moving these cattle and you start understanding, you go look at the research and talk to some experts on it, you really reduce your calving problems when you keep these cows exercising, moving them every day. They're forced to go stand up, go graze. They're not laying around on a lot, 16 hours a day and just getting up a little bit. So, and like anything else, you still run into challenges with it. There's days some challenges come at you, but I don't ever look at anything as a failure. I look at it as a learning experience, and learn from it, adjust, and, accordingly. But, we've got rid of most of our calving issues.
It's awesome.
And another thing we've been focused on, as we've transitioned, down this path, we've been focused on epigenetics. So we changed, later calving season. That means those calves are still on those mama sides. And, in January, they're out there with their mamas. Those daughters are learning from their mothers, what it takes to go, to survive in January.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a little snow on the ground or if it's cold, and mama's got some diversity out there, she's able to teach her daughters. So those daughters now, when they come back into the cow herd, they know how to survive. And we wean these calves, wean them in February. We still know our steers. We call that our low-hanging fruit, because that's what we're going to market.
Yeah.
We end up putting the shots in them, and we know they're going to go to commodity market. But what I'm saying is those calves are weighing, 5.5 weight, 6 1/4. While we're selling them, peak demand for grass season. We don't have the cost associated with those calves. We shipped them. I think we shipped our steers this year as the last week of March, somewhere in a time frame. But they sold really well.
Mm-hmm.
They did really good. So what I'm saying is, it's this building process. It's just not the soil. It's just not it's just not singular. It's how it's affecting the whole system.
Right.
Our livestock. And I will be honest with people, when we first moved down this path, we had a lot of cows drop out. They couldn't handle, they had to have the supplementation in order to reproduce. And,
mm-hmm.
So we kind of did a pretty major reduction in cow numbers, but now we're slowly building back as the forage, we build more forage and, we're able to graze longer. And so it's this whole system, managing as a system, approach versus, managing it, how maybe a market's being dictated or demands, but it's kind of like our heifer program. When we wean cattle, the heifers obviously get weaned with steers, but we retain all of our heifers. And unless there's a couple oddballs where I know I want to get rid of them, maybe they had a bad eye issue or something
mm-hmm.
the past summer, they're automatically going to leave. But everything else goes back out, and they're going to get an opportunity to enter the cow herd.
Yep.
We give them 2 breeding cycles, then we'll pull the heifers, and then we'll ultrasound them. And the ones that are bred go back to the cow herd. The ones not go to the grass finished operation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a complete about face. It's just, but we're making it economically work for us. We've reduced our overhead cost. All that equipment I used to have to feed cattle all winter long, we don't have it any longer. I got rid of it. I put that money into watering systems, put that money into high tensile wire, so we can move these cattle much easier. So it's kind of nice. It's kind of nice that, I'm no longer a dependent. Per se, I'm more independent
mm-hmm.
to make decisions. It's kind of like my steers. There, and when we did decide to market them, we were still pretty dry. We had a dry, late summer, fall, and pretty much most of the winter. But I can sit there, looking at my operation saying, okay, do I have abundance of grass? Do I want to go ahead and hold these steers and go ahead and run them through the summer and graze them? Do I have the forage to do that? Or, we're kind of looking a little bit droughty here, and we could run into some situations. We don't get some rains pretty soon. We're not going to have the forage. So, I've got a lot more options now to manage
mm-hmm.
versus what I used to have.
Yeah.
So that's one of the beautiful parts about it also.
Yeah. Yeah. So what, I think that's fascinating. And thank you for sharing so much about your operation, because I think that is, it's so interesting to see, as you start to have better nutrition, just like with human beings, when human beings have better nutrition, a lot of things change. And it's so interesting to hear you talk about the changes that you've seen in your cattle herd as the years have gone by and as they've become adapted to what I'm going to call the whole foods diet for cattle, right? Like they're eating whole foods, low supplementation, and you're seeing sort of this return of their natural cycles that is making them not only easier to manage, but they're healthier for their whole life, which I think is super fascinating.
It is, so I was down in the Chihuahuan Desert on Alejandro Carrilla's, the Las Damas Ranch. And Alejandro, if anybody, I wish people would go. He's got several YouTube videos, but this man basically took a ranch in the Chihuahuan Desert and turned it back into a grass savanna. And it's one of those deals, it's hard to believe until you see it. But I remember being on Alejandro's ranch, and we're in a paddock. There were 700 head of mama cows, and they had calves on their sides too. And there was 8 of us walking through this group, doing observations and talking. And it just blew my mind. Those cows, they kind of picked their heads up and they stepped away 2 or 3 steps and went back to foraging. And Jesus, one of the ranchers next to me, I just told him, I said, I can't believe the disposition on these cows. And he goes, you can tell a cow's disposition on how well nutritionally balanced she is. So the better nutritionally balanced she is, the better her disposition will be. And, that just kind of hit me really profoundly.
Yeah.
And I thought, how does that translate into society? And, Dr. Fred Provenza's got a great book, and I encourage anybody, hopefully listen to this podcast to listen to Dr. Fred Provenza and read his book, Nourishment. And he goes into this whole deal about phytocompounds and nutritional behavior and epigenetics and animals. And this is fascinating. It's called cellular memory, organ memory. And what Dr. Provenza did was he took some sheep and he made them phosphorus deficient. And then he took straw, one was apple flavor, I think, and the other one was maple flavor. But he put the phosphorus in the apple flavor. And the sheep were able to distinguish the apple flavor had the phosphorus to meet their nutritional deficiency. But then he kept that same set of genetics for the next 7 years. I think it was 7 years. And he re-replicated the experiment, except for this time, he put the phosphorus in the maple flavored straw. And then he exposed the sheep back to the straw. Well, through their organ memory, cellular memory, they knew they were deficient in phosphorus, but they instinctively went to the apple flavor, but the apple flavor didn't have the phosphorus in it. So this just went back to verify what he was talking about was we have this memory that's built into us. And what I'm trying to communicate here is I think there's a lot of us. It's from multi-generations. It could be, we think it may be up to 17 generations prior to us.
Wow.
But let's say your great maternal grandmother was deficient in magnesium, but she was able to find something, source something that met that magnesium deficiency and achieve satiety. And maybe you have that same deficiency in your own body, so you're craving something. So I know some cancer doctors now are encouraging some of their patients to do fasting. So I've talked to a couple of people who are going through chemo treatments and stuff, and they have done the fasting. And I always ask them, I said, well, when you come off your fast, what did you crave? And most of them kind of look a little bit surprised. They're like, and I remember one individual saying, well, it was leafy greens. And she goes, I hate leafy greens. So it was our body, we got to remember too, our body's made up of a lot of biology, bacteria.
Right.
And that bacteria is communicating, and we're starting to figure out with our brain of what we need to meet our satiety. And I think, unfortunately, our bodies are always constantly trying to, nutritionally satisfy ourselves. And we are, kind of misled, with foods and stuff, that it's actually meeting that satiety. Mm-hmm. And we just don't have the nutrient density in our foods like we used to. And there's a lot of research showing that. but that's the beautiful thing about what we can do. It goes back to the soil. It goes back to the microbiology. It goes back to building this nutrient density back within, our foods. So we can meet not only our animal satiety, nutritional needs, but also as humans. I mean, think about that. Think about the importance now. You just went from a farmer, to, quote unquote, feeding the world. But, are we really feeding the world? As in, if we're not providing the nutrient density, I mean, we're feeding a lot of calories. Mm-hmm. But if there's no nutrition in those calories, what good are we doing? But if I can really build more nutrition, actual nutrition, now that gives me an opportunity. Now I'm an entrepreneur. I like to make money. But how do I distinguish my product when I'm trying to direct market? Well, not only does it build in nutrition, but we're also building some sensuous flavors in our proteins. Mm-hmm. And so I can distinguish myself from others. And that's what I find fascinating. Yeah. And we're starting to get that accomplished.
Okay, so I have to talk about competition just a little bit. So, you just brought up the point of this is a key differentiator in how your product may taste. You've got a lower cost of production potentially than other producers. So then you flip over to the Understanding Ag and the Soil Health Academy, and now you're teaching all your competitors how to compete with you.
Okay, well.
So tell me about that a little bit, because I think it's awesome. But just talk to me about like where you are at in terms of an educator and I'm going to almost call you a scientist. It seems like your mindset is very much one of let's keep testing and let's experiment and let's find the best way we can do this and let's learn. But now you're wanting to learn together with everybody. So talk to me just a little bit about that, because I think that's really cool.
Well, when I speak to producers or any group, I tell people, as farmers, ranchers, we're the solution. We're not the problem. And I don't look at it as it is in competition. Mm-hmm. There's plenty out here for everybody. I mean, so let's look at it. Let's face it. Right now in society, especially within our country, there's it's kind of a powder keg, and we as an organization, we talk a lot internally, and we kind of come up with this, let's focus on the 80% of stuff everybody can agree on. We all can agree on we want better water quality. We can all agree on we want to sequester more carbon in the soil. We all can agree on we want more nutrient dense foods. We can all agree upon we want to rebuild back communities. And so let's focus on 80% of stuff that we can fix. And let's not worry about the other 20% right now. And let's come together. But as producers, I mean, that's our role. As a producer, I should want to infiltrate more water. I should want to infiltrate more water so I can grow more production. I should want to infiltrate more carbon in my soil, sequester more carbon. Because if I sequester more carbon, that means I'm holding on to a lot more of my soluble nutrients and holding it in my soil. I should want nutrient dense, because if I can build more protein in the grains I'm producing or the proteins I'm producing, not only is it helping feed my family, but it can be economically beneficial to livestock that I'm feeding. So it costs me less money. We should want robust small communities. I mean, let's face it, in production agriculture, we've got kind of a problem. We've got a lot older society. I mean, what's the average age? I think the last time I seen was 60 some years old. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have not very much youth coming back into ag.
Right.
And it's critical. We've got to have that youth. We've got to keep these small communities, we've got to somehow build back, communities again. I mean, look at the tax base. I mean, I don't know about the state of Iowa, but the state of Kansas, it's getting ridiculous. Mm-hmm. So, but these are things, and everybody doesn't think they can't do their part and, make a difference. But, think about this, an inch of water is about 27,000 gallons of water. There's all kinds of different information you can see on that. But just say if you own a quarter, 160 acres, and you increase your organic matter by 1%, that means you increased, water holding capacity exponentially. So 160 acres times 20,000 gallons, how many millions of gallons of water is that?
Mm-hmm.
So that you held within your system. So how did you help mitigate additional flooding events somewhere? How did you help, nutrient runoff somewhere?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, should be things, and these are things as producers that's putting dollars back in our pockets.
Right.
So I don't know why anybody would want to sit there and fight this. That's the problem is, I think too many times, we want to resist something because it sounds, ridiculous or whatever it may be. And I mean, I'm going to call it what it is, but, in production agriculture, we've been taught a lot about habits.
Mm-hmm.
And, we just got to become intentional and decide we're going to be the ones out here to change. And I encourage producers when I speak too. I said, we like to portray ourselves, as being this, common sense segment in society. Give us a piece of beta wire and we can get something fixed. We can get it, we're the ones that can figure stuff out. So, and I think right now in this country, if we need something, we need leaders. And I think us out here in agriculture should be the leaders.
Mm-hmm.
We shouldn't be waiting for someone to tell us. I think we need to pull our bootstraps up, go out here and show the rest of the population that, by golly, we can do this.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need you to tell us how to do it. We can do it on our own. And we can fix this. I mean, let's face it, production agriculture is what built this country. And I think production agriculture is what's going to take to fix this country.
When people make a decision to start implementing regenerative ag, like what is the progression of results that your organization is seeing people achieve? So, like if we take that ranch that you were talking about just a few minutes ago, and I'll get that link for that YouTube channel and we'll put that in the show notes for people so they can see that. But if you take a fairly, sort of hostile environment, an environment that's been, really damaged, how long as you start to implement these practices before you start to see some real measurable results?
Great question. So, I mean, it can be very significant. I mean, let's face it, you need a little good fortune, you need some moisture. So when we go into a lot of those more hostile environments, and I don't care what the environment is, one thing we always look for is where's our low-hanging fruit,
mm-hmm.
and where's our higher carbon areas. And our higher carbon areas is we're going to have our most amount of microbiology. So our goal is how do we start expanding that out further out into it? Now, for like Alejandro, for example, I mean, the tool he had at his disposal was cattle.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, the identification was the high carbon areas. They did have to utilize a lot of bale grazing. They were managing those cattle through those higher carbon areas, doing bale grazing techniques. But they were starting to wick that microbiology and that cover, that armor that we talk about, one of the principles, further and further out into his ranch.
Mm-hmm.
So it really goes back to understanding the principles. Nature never did a lot of disturbance. And we look at disturbance as could be tillage, it could even be a herbicide. And I want people to understand something. As an organization, we don't discourage anybody doing any of that. What we try to do is educate people of what the consequences are when we do that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so minimal soil disturbance. We got to build armor on the soil, and the armor is the skin. So I've got to get biomass down on the soil surface. So when I do get blessed with some moisture, I can hold that moisture to allow that microbiology starting to function. But it's not only that, I need a living root. Because remember, it takes that living root capturing sunlight and turning that sunlight into carbohydrates. Not only does those carbohydrates help build vegetation above ground, but those carbohydrates also, the plants, I mean, this is a beautiful relationship. Those plants are providing some of that solar energy, some of that sunshine, carbohydrates back to the soil microbiology. And in return, that microbiology is helping gather nutrients for that plant. So
mm-hmm.
It's a relationship, like you feed me, I feed you. And this is stuff, I mean, what's kind of interesting is a lot of stuff really wasn't known in production agriculture. I mean, when I went to college, We didn't talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
It's not been until the last 20, even last 10, 15 years until we've really started to understand this association and how this actually works. But, the living root, but it's just not one living root. It's like anything else. I mean, we need diversity of living roots. So diversity is going to feed different microbiology. So it's kind of like you and I. If I'm just growing corn and soybeans, well, I'm going to produce a house full of people that can only literally live on soybeans and corn diets
Mm-hmm.
from microbiology. Well, I want more diversity in my system. So different food in my refrigerator. So I need diversity of plants. That's where cover crops comes in.
Mm-hmm.
The cover crops allow us an opportunity to provide diversity in some of these cropping systems. And as we can build that diversity, we help build different microbiology, and especially different fungal communities. And the fungal now is what really helps build the macroaggregate. And one of the big principles is if we can integrate animals into it, the animals provide us an opportunity to take an economic benefit from that above ground biomass we grow. But it's also that animals too, when an animal grazes a plant and when it's grazed properly, it sends out a lot of different root exudates or different chemical signals the plant does to attract different soil microbiology. So it's how all we're truly trying to do is how did nature prior to us help build this system?
Mm-hmm.
Well, she utilized these principles. That's all it had. How do we go out here as producers, farmers and ranchers, and how do we remimic these and understand the importance? Why do we not want to overgraze? Well, we overgraze. The plants no longer has its solar collectors, its leaves,
Mm-hmm.
capturing photosynthesis. And then if it doesn't have them, then it's hard for it to feed the microbiology. And so what's going to happen to microbiology that was feeding? Well, it's going to sporulate up, go to sleep, or even die.
Mm-hmm.
So, but if I keep this factory working in my soil for me, it just keeps exponentially building. And I mean, that's something I don't have to write a check for.
Right.
And it provides the nutrients back. And I mean, honestly, I just got them pulling what was called Haney Soils Test that Regen Ag Labs does for us in Nebraska. It was developed by Dr. Rick Haney. And, right now I haven't used any synthetic nutrients on a couple of fields for 5 or 6 years. And I've got almost 75 pounds of plant available nitrogen in that system. And all I've done is implement the principles. I've got phosphorus. I think it's 40 to 50 pounds of phosphorus that's plant available. I mean, so we, as Understanding Ag, we have many projects going on around the country. We've got the oat project in Canada and North Dakota. We've got the wheat project in South Central Kansas. We've got the dairy project in Michigan. But we've started doing what's called the Total Digestible Nutrient Test by Regen Ag Labs. And it's a 12-inch core samples we take and looking at the total nutrients, that 12-inch soil profile. And it just blows my mind. I mean, a lot of them are coming back, 16 to 2,200 pounds of nitrogen in the 12-inch profile.
Wow.
3 to 4,000 pounds of phosphorus. It's all there. We just got to build the biology back in order to cycle it. Take it out of the organic form, cycle it back into the inorganic form, making the plant available. So, I mean, it's just going back to getting an understanding, deciding to become intentional, applying the principles, and being intentional about it. And if you're intentional, I mean, and it takes intentional. It doesn't happen overnight. Remember, we work with an ecology. So it does take just a little bit of time. But if you start implementing and start being, like I said, intentional, it will start occurring. And it's the most incredible thing. And if there's something if I could have a wish, I wish my grandparents could see what we've got accomplished. Because we spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours when I was growing up, trying to put a square peg into a round hole
Mm-hmm.
for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, that's just amazing. I think that this conversation has just been amazing, Shane, on many levels. Just to listen to you talk about the successes, to listen to you talk about, what we are starting to understand about the way that we produce food and the way we take care of resources. I think this is amazing. If people wanted to connect with Understanding Ag or attend a Soil Health Academy, how do they go about that?
Well, you can go to Understanding Ag LLC, and that's our homepage. And we've got numerous webinars that are free. People can go back and listen to some of these world-leading experts, scientists, technicians, producers. You can go to the Soil Health Academy. And on both websites, there should be where we host academies throughout the United States. We do one usually once a month, kind of throughout. I mean, like the month of May, we're going to be down in Alabama. I think in June, we're going to be up in northeastern Iowa doing an academy. But so we're kind of scattered throughout the country doing these once a month. Mm-hmm. So if you look at those pages, usually there's registration of where the meeting's going to be. And we encourage producers, to come. I know it's an obligation. There is an expense associated with it, but it's like anything, if it costs you something, you're going to have some skin in the game, and, you're going to be a lot more intentional because you've exuded some of your wealth to come learn. Mm-hmm. And that's going to encourage you to use it. And I don't want to sound hypocritical or anything here, but, I think too many times we get provided a lot of stuff for nothing, free, and we don't take it real serious. And I say this because I do talk to producers from Australia, from Mexico, and from all over, other areas, and they don't get free programs. Mm-hmm. They don't get subsidies. And some of these guys I'm talking to and get to see their operations, it's incredible.
Yeah.
Because they really had to buckle down. They had to become learners, and they had to become intentional. And it's truly amazing what they're getting accomplished. But we've got case studies. If you go to Understanding Ag, we got case studies on several producers who are getting this accomplished. And, so this isn't, pie in the sky. This isn't abracadabra. This is stuff guys are getting things done. Mm-hmm. And
yeah, we will make
it's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, what we'll do, Shane, is I will collect all of that information. We will get that in the show notes so that listeners can easily connect with you, find out more about the academies, and actually get out on some farms that are doing this to learn on site through you and some of your other amazing consultants. And I just really want to thank you so much for the conversation today. This has been awesome. I'm super excited just to see what will happen in the next few years as we continue to learn more and have more results and get more people involved in this conversation. So thank you so very much.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to speak. So you have a wonderful day, and I look forward to getting to meet you in person one of these days.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much.
Take care.
This is Rena Striegel, and you have been listening to Ag Inspo, the podcast. Please visit my website at tomorrowiscoming.com and find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. If you haven't yet, please go to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join me next week for another inspirational episode where you will hear from another amazing entrepreneur who has had the courage to break through and bring an idea to life.